These replicas of Revolutionary War gear come courtesy of the museum for which the words George Washington slept here are just a starting point. Martha Teichner is our guide.
Philadelphia. The Liberty Bell is here. The Declaration of Independence and the U.S. Constitution were drafted and signed here. It was home to Philly's favorite founding father, Benjamin Franklin, and America's most famous flag maker, Betsy Ross. So what better place for the Museum of the American Revolution, which opened in 2017? Its centerpiece, this.
Today, Washington's tent is here.
George Washington's tent, enshrined now in its own theater.
Reminding us of times when the nation's future hung in the balance.
As his soldiers did, you see it as a stand-in for Washington himself.
The tent was the symbol that he said, "I've never left your side. I've been with you through the entire war." And every one of those men knew that they had seen those candles burning late into the night. And these are all objects in this gallery that were present during that fighting.
Scott Stevenson is president and CEO of the museum.
Imagine it's the morning of April 19, 1775, and on that hilltop are those companies of Minutemen, and the British march in.
Concord, Massachusetts, where it all began. The two sides fought it out that first day of the war at the North Bridge.
There had been firing early in the day at Lexington Green, but for the reason that two British soldiers fell there at the bridge, this was considered the shot heard round the world.
On display like a holy relic, a piece of that original bridge.
This beam literally heard that shot fired on the morning of April 19th.
But the museum sees its mission as doing more than reinforcing for visitors, 725,000 so far, a mythologized version of the American creation story.
What I want them to come away with is realizing that this is not just a quaint story that's set a long time ago, that only involves people that look like me, standing with wigs on, looking at a piece of paper on the table. There was violence that was involved, there was uncertainty, there were people of all backgrounds who were involved in creating this nation.
Who didn't always get along. During the winter of 1775, George Washington really did break up a snowball fight between militiamen he was trying to unite into an army.
And the snowball fight essentially turned into a riot, where about 1,000 people were engaged in fighting each other right out here in Harvard Yard.
Yes, of all places, Harvard Yard.
They were here.
Vincent Brown is a professor of African American history at Harvard. He advised the museum. And there were African Americans involved.
There were African Americans involved, there were Native Americans involved, and lots of local people.
African Americans have largely been left out of the Revolution narrative, but not here.
They've got that great moment in the museum where they're asking you to imagine a conversation between two black people, one a British soldier and one an enslaved person who is trying to figure out what they want to do in that environment.
The proposition, freedom, in exchange for running away and joining the British Army.
There are about 15,000 black people who fought for the British during the American Revolution, and about 5,000 black people who fought for the Patriots.
Slavery expanded exponentially after the war. On full display, an uncomfortable contradiction.
Well, one of the most powerful things, I think, in the museum is that set of manacles for a child that must have been used on an enslaved child. How could we have manacles for a child in a museum about the American Revolution, which is supposed to be about freedom? It gets us thinking.
About difficult decisions, about winners and losers.
African Americans and Native Americans were losers of the American Revolution.
The Oneida people lost big time. Part of a union of 6 Iroquois nations, they had no choice but to take sides.
That conflict came on Iroquois lands, our lands.
Ray Halbritter heads the Oneida Nation in New York.
Well, our Oneida people decided to ally with the colonists.
Other tribes chose to go with the British.
Yes.
The Oneida were the unsung heroes of Valley Forge.
Well, our people knew and heard about how George Washington's army was starving, so we brought hundreds of bushels of corn in midwinter.
They were promised their allegiance would preserve their lands and way of life. It didn't.
Well, through the years, a number of fraudulent treaties took place, and we lost our land.
So the nation started out 6 million acres.
Yeah.
What did it end up?
32 acres in...
That's it,
the
32 acres.
32 acres.
When you started out with 6 million.
Yeah.
That's shocking.
Yeah, it is.
The Oneida, now supported by casino revenue, donated $10 million of the museum's $150 million cost, so their story would be told. So that alongside the muskets and child-friendly entertainments, a nuanced, warts and all version of the American Revolution shines through.
Are we mature enough as a nation, as a culture, to not sweep under the carpet all of the terrible injustices that were done? And it's not an unpatriotic act to shine light on those and acknowledge them.
And to connect the dots between long-ago battles and ourselves. I see Meet the Future of the American Revolution in mirrors. Why?
So this is a moment when we want, everyone to see themselves reflected in the story that they've just been through, and it's a reminder that we are swimming in a stream of history. Ultimately, our future is together.